The massive alien ship appeared over New York without warning. It simply materialized, breaking every known law of physics, its dark metal hull stretching for miles across the morning sky. The world held its breath. Smaller ships descended from the massive vessel, landing in a perfect circle around United Nations headquarters. Out stepped beings in gleaming armor, their movements precise and mechanical. They marched in perfect formation toward the hastily assembled group of world leaders and military commanders. Admiral James stood at the front of the human delegation, his weathered face showing no emotion. 40 years of military service had taught him to keep his thoughts hidden. Behind him stood representatives from every major nation, a unified human front for the first time in history. The alien commander approached, its armor gleaming under Earth's sun. When it spoke, the words came through some kind of translator, flat and emotionless. "We are the Galactic Empire. We control 10,000 systems across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. You will surrender your world and integrate into our civilization. Resistance is..." The alien paused, as if searching for the right word. "Inefficient." Admiral James waited exactly 3 seconds before responding. Those who knew him recognized the small smile that crossed his face, the same smile he wore before every major battle. "With respect," he said, his voice carrying across the plaza, "you should run." The alien commander's helmet tilted slightly, the only sign of confusion. "Perhaps your translation matrix is malfunctioning. We are the Galactic Empire. We have conquered species far more advanced than yours. Your technological level is barely Category 3. You have not even colonized your own solar system." James's smile grew wider. "That's what we wanted everyone to think." The alien's next words carried a hint of annoyance. "Your cities are exposed. Your orbital space is undefended. Your military technology is primitive. You will be integrated into the Empire within 1 standard rotation." "Look up," James said softly. The alien commander's helmet turned skyward. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, like stars appearing at dusk, points of light began flickering into existence. First hundreds, then thousands, then millions. The Empire's sensors screamed as human stealth fields dropped, revealing a planet surrounded by defensive platforms. "Impossible," the alien commander said. "Our scans showed nothing." "Yes," James agreed. "That was the point. You have quantum shielding, AI-driven targeting systems. This technology is beyond your civilization's development stage." James stepped forward. "You know what your empire's greatest weakness is. You think in straight lines. Category 1 civilizations develop like this. Category 2 civilizations develop like that. Everything neat, everything ordered, everything predictable." He gestured to the city around them. "Humanity, we're chaos. We develop unevenly. We skip steps. We do things we're not supposed to be capable of doing because nobody told us we couldn't do them." The Admiral's voice hardened. "You found our wars barbaric, didn't you? Saw our history of conflict and thought it made us primitive. But every war taught us something. Every battle made us stronger. While your empire was spreading across the stars in perfect formation, humanity was learning, adapting, preparing. The alien commander's voice betrayed genuine confusion. "For what?" "For you," James said simply. "We've known about your empire for decades. Our quantum arrays detected your ships long ago. We watched. We studied. We learned. And we got ready." The Admiral turned away. "You have 1 hour to leave Earth's orbit. After that, we will respond to any hostile action with full force." He paused, then looked back. "I suggest you run." As James walked away, one of the younger UN representatives hurried to his side. "Sir, was it wise to reveal our capabilities?" The Admiral's smile had faded. They needed to know. The Empire thinks in absolutes, total victory or total defeat. By showing them our strength, we might prevent a war. And if we don't, James looked up at the massive alien ship still hovering over the city. Then they'll learn why humans never lost a war against a technologically superior force. We don't fight fair. We don't fight predictably. His smile returned, but there was no humor in it. And we never, ever stop. Above them, the defensive grid hummed, millions of weapons locked on the Empire's ships, waiting for the order that everyone hoped wouldn't come. The first contact was over. The next move belonged to the Empire. The Empire's response came exactly 1 hour and 1 minute after Admiral James's warning. 1,000 warships appeared in perfect formation above Earth's atmosphere, their weapons charged and ready. In the underground command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, Admiral James watched the holographic display with the same small smile he had worn during the first contact. Around him, military commanders from every nation stood in silence, watching the Empire's ships arrange themselves into their standard attack pattern. "Right on time," James said quietly. And exactly as predicted. On the main screen, the Empire's message flashed. "Your defiance is noted. Standard pacification protocols are now in effect. Surrender or be destroyed." James pressed a button on his command console. "This is Admiral James to all Earth Defense Grid stations. Execute Protocol Omega." What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. The Empire's ships fired their first volley, a standard opening move that had worked on 100 worlds. The energy beams streaked toward Earth's atmosphere, only to splash harmlessly against shields that shouldn't have existed. Then Earth's defense grid woke up. Millions of platforms, hidden in plain sight as satellites, space debris, and even asteroids, activated at once. The quantum network linking them moved faster than light itself, each platform acting as part of a single vast weapon. The Empire's neat formation became their downfall. The defense grid's AI had calculated exactly where each ship would be, based on decades of studying their battle tactics. Each platform fired simultaneously, their combined energy forming patterns the Empire's shields had never been designed to stop. In the command center, one of the younger officers whispered, "They're not even trying to dodge." "They can't," James replied. "Their battle computers are still trying to process how we blocked their first attack. The Empire's ships are too automated, too dependent on their protocols." The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted exactly 3 minutes and 42 seconds. When it was over, 853 Empire ships had been destroyed. The remaining ships hung motionless in space, their systems overloaded by attack patterns their designers had never imagined possible. On the command screen, a new message appeared from the Empire's flagship. "This is impossible. Your civilization is only Category 3. You cannot have this technology." James leaned forward to respond. "You're right. By your standards, we shouldn't. But humans don't follow standard paths of development. We jump ahead. We experiment. We take risks you would never consider." He paused, letting his words sink in. "While you were perfecting your current technology, we were trying things your scientists said couldn't work. While you were spreading across the galaxy in perfect formation, we were building weapons specifically designed to defeat your perfect formations." The Empire's response came slower this time. "Why? Why prepare so extensively for a war against an enemy you had never met?" "Because we knew someone like you would come eventually," James answered. "Humanity's history is full of powerful empires meeting smaller civilizations. It never ends well for someone. We decided it wouldn't be us." Silence filled the command channel for nearly a minute. When the Empire's message finally came, it was different from their usual formal communications. The High Command must be informed of this development. We withdraw. As the surviving Empire ships retreated, one of the Chinese generals turned to James. "They'll be back." "Of course they will," James nodded. "But next time they'll come with their main fleet. 10,000 ships at least." "Is that not concerning?" the Russian commander asked. James's smile returned. "They still think this was our entire defense network. They still haven't realized that we've colonized Mars, Venus, and the asteroid belt. They haven't found our shipyards hidden in the Kuiper Belt. He looked around the room. And they certainly don't know about our stealth fleets. The Admiral turned back to the holographic display, where the last Empire ships were vanishing into hyperspace. They'll return with a bigger fleet, fighting the same way they always have. And we'll be ready, just like we always are. Above them, Earth's defense grid reset itself, weapons recharging, stealth fields reactivating. The first battle was over. The real war hadn't even begun. The Empire's main fleet arrived 3 days later. 10,000 ships dropped out of hyperspace in a display of power that would have terrified any normal civilization. Their formation spread across the entire solar system, a web of destruction designed to trap and eliminate all resistance. In his new command center on Mars, Admiral James watched them arrive. The massive underground facility, hidden beneath Olympus Mons, had been operational for 15 years. Not that the Empire knew that. "Right on schedule," he said, looking at the holographic display. "Status report. All colonies reporting ready," his second-in-command replied. "Venus defense grid online. Mars orbital platforms activated. Asteroid belt mines in position. Titan base reports drone swarms ready for launch." James nodded. The Empire still thought they were fighting a single planet. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The Empire's message boomed through all frequencies. "This is High Commander Vale of the Imperial Fleet. Your previous victory was impressive but meaningless. Submit now or face the full might of the Empire." James waited 30 seconds before responding. "This is Admiral James. I see you brought more ships this time." He paused. "It won't be enough." The Imperial fleet launched their attack. This time, they split their forces, attacking from multiple angles. They had learned something from their first defeat, but not enough. "Launch the drones," James ordered. From Saturn's moon Titan, millions of small, AI-controlled ships burst into space. Each one was barely larger than a car, but together they moved like a swarm of angry insects. The Empire's sensors couldn't track them all. There were too many, moving too erratically. "Fascinating," one of the science officers said, watching the battle unfold. "Their ships can't adapt. Their eyes are too restricted." James nodded. "The Empire fears true artificial intelligence. They program their computers with strict rules, exact protocols. Our AIs." He gestured to the swarm of drones tearing through the Imperial formation. "We taught them to think for themselves." The Empire's neat formations began to break as the drone swarms attacked from all directions. Their ships, designed to fight large-scale battles against similar opponents, couldn't handle the chaos of combat against millions of small independent targets. Then humanity revealed their next surprise. "Venus base, you're clear to launch," James ordered. The clouds of Venus parted as humanity's stealth fleet rose from the hidden shipyards. These weren't the automated platforms that had won the first battle. These were warships, crewed by humans, and AIs working together, using technology the Empire had deemed impossible. "They're breaking formation," someone reported. "Their command structure is fragmenting." On the main screen, they could see the Imperial fleet's perfect pattern dissolving into chaos. Some ships were retreating, others pressing the attack, their unified strategy falling apart in the face of humanity's unconventional warfare. "Sir," a communications officer called out, "we're picking up transmissions from some of the Empire's ships. They're asking questions." James leaned forward. "What kind of questions?" "About us. About how we achieved this level of technology. About why their leaders told them we were primitive." The officer looked up. "Some are asking about democracy." James smiled. This was what they had really been waiting for. Send them the information package. All of it. Our history, our governments, our freedoms. Let them see what we're really fighting for. As the battle raged across the solar system, something extraordinary happened. Imperial ships began powering down their weapons. Not surrendering, just stopping. watching, learning. Sir, his second-in-command said quietly, was this your plan all along? Not to defeat them, but to make them question. James watched as more Imperial ships disengaged from the battle. Humanity's greatest weapon was never our technology, he said. It was our ideas. Freedom, choice, the right to decide your own path. He gestured to the display. The Empire's people have never had that choice, until now. The battle wasn't over, but its nature had changed. Across the Imperial fleet, crews were beginning to think for themselves, many for the first time. The Empire had come expecting to crush a primitive civilization. Instead, they had found something far more dangerous: hope. Above Mars, the drone swarms continued their dance, protecting those Imperial ships that had chosen to stop fighting, while Venus's stealth fleet stood ready for those that hadn't. The real revolution was just beginning. 1 week after the Battle of the Solar System, humanity launched its counter-offensive, but not with ships, guns, or armies. They started with a simple message, broadcast across every Imperial communication channel. To all beings of the Empire, you have been lied to. Here is the truth. In his command ship approaching Imperial space, Admiral James watched as humanity's most powerful weapon deployed: information. Years of collected data about Empire corruption, secret files about suppressed technologies, and evidence of the Council's lies spread across Imperial networks faster than their sensors could stop it. Status report, James ordered, standing on his bridge. The ship, named Liberty, moved silently through space using stealth technology that the Empire still couldn't detect. Sir, our infiltration units are reporting success across 18 major Imperial worlds, his intelligence officer reported. The Empire's own people are spreading our message. They're hungry for the truth. James nodded. While the Empire had been watching Earth's skies, human agents had spent years living among Imperial citizens, learning their cultures, making friends, and planting seeds of doubt about their rulers. Sir, a young officer called out, Imperial Defense Fleet detected ahead. 500 ships. Just watch, James said calmly. As they approached the Imperial fleet, something unexpected happened. Instead of attacking, 300 Imperial ships suddenly changed their identification codes to a new signal. 3 simple words in English. We choose freedom. The remaining Imperial ships, confused by this unprecedented act of mass defection, held their fire. They had no protocols for this situation. Their command structure wasn't designed to handle rebellion from within. Send in the infiltration teams, James ordered. Small stealth ships, crewed by humans and their AI partners, slipped past the paralyzed Imperial defenses. They carried no weapons. Instead, they carried something far more dangerous: the truth about human history. Sir, his communication officer reported, Imperial citizens are overwhelming their local networks with questions. Their leaders can't contain it anymore. They're asking about democracy, about free elections, about personal rights. James smiled. How long did the Empire think they could keep their people ignorant? How long did they think they could hide the concept of freedom? On the main screen, they watched as Imperial civilians took to the streets of their worlds. Not with violence, but with questions. Questions their leaders couldn't answer. Questions about why humans, these supposedly primitive beings, lived with freedoms they had never known. Admiral, his second-in-command said quietly, the Empire's military response is disorganized. Their ships are receiving conflicting orders. Some commanders are declaring independence from the Imperial Council. Of course they are, James replied. The Empire built their military on absolute obedience, but they forgot something important about thinking beings. He looked around his bridge, at the humans and AIs working together as equals. Everyone, eventually, wants to be free. The Liberty continued its advance into Imperial space, followed by the fleet of defected Imperial ships. They met no resistance. Instead, they received thousands of messages from Imperial worlds, all asking the same thing: teach us. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported, "our deep cover agents are emerging on hundreds of Imperial worlds. They're organizing peaceful protests, teaching about democracy, showing Imperial citizens how to resist peacefully." James watched the revolution unfold. The Empire had expected a military invasion. They had prepared for battles, for violence, for the kind of warfare they understood. Instead, humanity had given their people something far more powerful: hope. "Send the second wave," he ordered. "Educational materials, historical documents, guides to setting up local governments. Everything they need to build something new." As the Liberty moved deeper into Imperial space, James received a private message from Earth Command. He read it and smiled. "The Imperial Council is calling for emergency negotiations," he announced to his crew. "They say they're willing to discuss reforms." His second-in-command looked concerned. "Can we trust them?" James shook his head. "No, but it doesn't matter anymore. Their people have seen the truth. You can't unring that bell." Across Imperial space, billions of beings were waking up to new possibilities. The Empire had feared human weapons, human ships, human soldiers. But in the end, humanity's most powerful weapon was something the Empire had never even considered: the power of an idea whose time had come. The Imperial Council gathered in their grand chamber on the capital world for the first time in 50 years. All 12 council members sat in their traditional seats of power, but something had changed. The fear they had always used to control others now showed in their own eyes. Through a secure quantum channel, they watched their empire crumble. 3,000 worlds in rebellion. The security minister reported, his voice shaking. "Imperial forces are refusing orders on nearly every frontier." "The humans," he paused, struggling with the words. "The humans aren't even fighting us anymore. They don't need to." On the massive screens surrounding the chamber, they watched scenes from across their empire. Peaceful protests filled the streets of 1,000 worlds. Imperial citizens were holding their own elections, creating their own local governments, doing things that had been forbidden for 10,000 years. "How?" the Grand Counselor demanded. "How did they do this to us?" In the corner of the chamber, a hidden human observation device recorded everything. In his command ship, now orbiting the Empire's capital world, Admiral James watched the Council's meeting with a grim satisfaction. "They still don't understand," he said to his crew. "They're looking for a weapon, a strategy, a military solution. They can't see that their own system was their weakness." On the main screen, reports continued to pour in from across the Empire. Imperial military academies were transforming into universities. Restricted technologies were being shared openly. Species that the Empire had kept separate for centuries were meeting, trading, learning from each other. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported, "the Empire's economic system is shifting. Their controlled markets are dissolving. Free trade is breaking out everywhere." James nodded. "When people taste freedom, they want more of it." The Empire spent 10,000 years telling their people what they couldn't do. Now they're learning what they can do. Suddenly, alarms blared across the ship. On the screen, they watched as Imperial security forces surrounded the council chamber. "What's happening?" James demanded. "Sir, it's the Imperial Guard." "There." His officer paused in disbelief. "They're arresting the council." The crew watched in stunned silence as the Empire's own elite guards led the council members away in restraints. Not violently, not with anger, but with the quiet determination of people who had finally chosen to do what was right. "Message coming in from the guard commander," the communications officer announced. The guard commander's hologram appeared on the bridge. He stood straight and proud, but his eyes showed the weight of his decision. "Admiral James, on behalf of the Imperial Guard, I formally request human assistance in organizing free elections across the Empire." James smiled. "May I ask what prompted this action?" "We read your histories," the commander replied. "We learned about your military coups, how they usually lead to more dictatorships. We learned about peaceful transitions of power, about the rule of law. He paused. We chose to do this the right way. Across the empire, the news spread at light speed. The council's arrest was not the end of the empire. It was the beginning of something new. Imperial worlds weren't descending into chaos as the council had always warned. Instead, they were building something that had never existed in this part of the galaxy: democracy. Sir, his second-in-command said quietly, Earth Command is asking for an update. What should I tell them? James looked at the screen showing peaceful revolutions spreading across thousands of worlds. Tell them it worked. Tell them that Operation Freedom succeeded beyond our wildest dreams. He paused. And tell them we're going to need a lot of teachers. The Empire had expected humans to destroy their military, their ships, their weapons. Instead, humanity had given their people something far more valuable: the tools to build their own future. In the council chamber, now empty of its former rulers, representatives from 1,000 worlds were already gathering. They carried with them copies of Earth's greatest documents: constitutions, bills of rights, declarations of independence. Not to copy, but to learn from, to build something new. The empire was ending. But unlike so many empires in human history, it wouldn't end in fire and blood. It would end with hope. 3 months after the council's arrest, Admiral James stood in the grand observation deck of the former Imperial Palace. Below him, the capital city buzzed with activity. Former Imperial citizens walked freely in streets that had once been restricted, sharing ideas that would have been forbidden just months ago. Quite a view, isn't it? A voice said behind him. James turned to see the former guard commander, now serving as head of the transition committee. The Empire's most feared warrior had traded his battle armor for simple civilian clothes. Your people are adapting well, James said. Too well, some would say. The commander walked to the window. That's what we're here to discuss, isn't it? The real meaning of your warning. James smiled. You figured it out. Yes. When you said run, you weren't threatening us with destruction. The commander's eyes swept across the city. You were warning us that everything we believed, everything we were, would change forever. On the streets below, a group of young beings from different species sat together in what had once been a restricted military zone. They were reading copies of Earth's philosophical works, debating ideas that would have been punishable by death 3 months ago. Your warning wasn't about your weapons, the commander continued. It was about your ideas: freedom, democracy, individual rights, concepts more dangerous to the Empire than any fleet. James nodded. Ideas are like viruses. Once they take hold, they spread on their own. We didn't need to conquer the Empire. We just needed to introduce the right ideas and let them spread naturally. A holographic display activated, showing reports from across former Imperial space. Worlds that had been enemies for centuries were now trading partners. Species that had been kept apart were forming cultural exchanges. Former Imperial scientists were freely sharing discoveries that the Council had kept hidden. The Council never understood humans, the commander said. They thought you were primitive because you fought among yourselves. They didn't realize that your conflicts taught you to question, to adapt, to change. While the Empire spent 10,000 years staying the same, James added, we thought we were perfect. The commander's voice carried a hint of regret. We thought our way was the only way. We never imagined. He gestured to the bustling city below. This. On the streets, a former Imperial news station was broadcasting its first free election. Citizens who had never had a choice in their government were lining up to vote, their faces showing mixture of fear and excitement. Some of the old guard are calling it the human virus, the commander said. This spread of freedom, of democratic ideas. They say you've infected our people with dangerous thoughts. James laughed softly. And what do you think? I think. The commander paused, choosing his words carefully. I think we needed this infection. I think we were dying of our own perfection, our own rigidity. You didn't destroy us. You woke us up. Alerts sounded from James's communicator. "The first assembly is gathering," he said. "Representatives from every world in the former empire, meeting as equals for the first time." The commander nodded. "And what will Earth's role be in this new galaxy?" "We'll help where asked, step back where not." James turned from the window. "Humanity learned long ago that democracy can't be imposed. It has to grow naturally. We just planted the seeds." As they walked toward the assembly chamber, the commander asked one final question. "If you had to do it all again, would you still warn us to run?" James stopped and looked at him. "Yes, because running from what you were let you become what you could be." Below them, the former imperial capital continued its transformation. Not through conquest, not through violence, but through the unstoppable power of ideas whose time had come. The Empire had feared human weapons. They should have feared human dreams. 1 year after the Empire's transformation began, the first Galactic Assembly gathered in the reformed capital. The former Imperial Palace, once a symbol of absolute power, had been transformed into the Hall of Worlds, its dark corridors now filled with light and voices from 1,000 species. Admiral James stood at the back of the great chamber, watching representatives from every former imperial world take their seats. Some wore traditional empire clothing. Others had chosen new styles reflecting their freed cultures. Unity through diversity, a human concept that had spread like wildfire through the former empire. "Strange to think it all started with one morning," said a voice beside him. James turned to see Maria, his chief intelligence officer who had spent 15 years undercover in the Empire before the Revolution. "Run," James quoted with a smile. "Shortest declaration of war in human history." "Was it really a war?" Maria asked, watching as more delegates filled the chamber. "We barely fired a shot after that first battle." Before James could answer, the assembly hall fell silent. At the center podium, the former guard commander, now elected as the first speaker of the assembly, raised his hands. 1 year ago, the speaker's voice carried across the chamber. "A primitive species warned us to run. We didn't understand then. We thought they meant run from their weapons, their ships, their technology." He paused, looking across the gathered representatives. "We were wrong." On massive screens around the chamber, images played from the past year. Peaceful protests, first elections, species meeting in friendship for the first time, children from different worlds playing together in parks that had once been restricted military zones. "They meant run from what we were," the speaker continued. "Run from our rigid thinking, our fear of change, our belief in absolute control. Run toward something better." James watched as delegates from worlds that had been bitter enemies under the Empire nodded in agreement. The changes of the past year had been remarkable, but not without challenges. The speaker gestured to a document displayed above the chamber, the new Galactic Constitution. This document, crafted with help from our human friends, but written by our own people, guarantees rights we never knew existed. Freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, the right to choose our own leaders. He turned to where James stood. Would Earth's representative care to address the assembly? James walked to the podium, feeling the eyes of the galaxy upon him. He took a moment to look at the gathered delegates, former imperial citizens who had chosen a new path. 1 year ago, I told your empire to run, he began. Today, I want to thank you for running in the right direction. You could have chosen chaos. You could have chosen revenge. Instead, you chose to build something new. He gestured to the Constitution floating above them. This document isn't a copy of Earth's laws. It's something uniquely yours, shaped by your experiences, your cultures, your hopes. That's the real victory here, not that you became like us, but that you found your own way to freedom. The chamber erupted in applause. As it died down, James continued. Earth doesn't want to rule your worlds or control your future. We want to be partners, friends, equals in a galaxy where all species can choose their own path. The speaker stepped forward again. And what would you say to those who still fear these changes, who say we're moving too fast, James smiled. I would say, keep running. Not away from something, but toward something. Toward a future you choose for yourselves. As the assembly began its first official session, James stepped back, watching democracy take its first steps in this part of the galaxy. His communicator blinked with a message from Earth Command. Mission accomplished. He looked at the chamber one last time before replying. Former enemies working together. Former slaves speaking freely. Former imperial worlds choosing their own destinies. Mission accomplished, he wrote back. But their journey is just beginning. Above the assembly, the new flag of the Galactic Federation unfurled, a symbol not of conquest or control, but of unity and hope. The Empire had feared humanity would destroy their civilization. Instead, humanity had helped them build a better one. The warning to run had been just the beginning. The real adventure, the journey of freedom, was only just starting.